you very much. Thank you and welcome to the Churchill Club. My name is Karen Tucker. I'm CEO. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. This program is called the Relationship Economy. No matter what we wish to achieve, relationships are going to be the foundation for our success. And while some of the basics of relationship building I like to think will never change, such as building trust and mutual respect, really how we connect and relate is still very much in flux, largely due to the capabilities that digital technologies have enabled. So here to share their up-to-the-minute insights and perspectives are three extremely distinguished individuals who know quite a bit about the topic at hand, starting with Rishi, Dun & Bradstreet's CMO and former head of digital marketing for Dell's B2B enterprise business. Keith Ferrazzi, CEO of Ferrazzi Greenlight, and author of 2 New York Times best-selling books, Never Eat Alone and Who's Got Your Back. And Heidi Roizen, who is operating partner at Draper Fisher Jurvetson, educator in the Stanford Technology Ventures Group in the engineering department at Stanford, and also a notable Silicon Valley entrepreneur. She will lead the discussion. We have also asked her to please participate in the discussion. Before we start, we would like to thank Dun & Bradstreet, particularly Barb Robinson, for your partnership in making this program possible. Thank you. A few brief words about Churchill Club for our new guests. We are a prominent technology and business forum with the nonprofit mission to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. We do this largely by convening programs where we look at what's new, next, not widely known, and particularly if we're looking at trends today, and we can shine a light on the implication of those trends for opportunities tomorrow. That's really where we wish to go with our conversations. So we have 2 more compelling programs before you before the end of the year. One is this Friday, Jeffrey Pfeffer. It's a breakfast. Don't miss that if you can join us. And then the last one is a CIO Outlook program on December 9th. We kick off next year with Brad Katsuyama, the CEO of IEX, and the subject of Michael Lewis's Flash Boys book, which I understand will also be made into a movie. We have a lot of other interesting programming coming up, so we hope to see your faces again with us soon. If you are tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. And with that, let's call up our speakers and get the discussion started. Thank you.
Is that my water or yours?
I have to split it.
Water, wine, water,
We
wine.
got water and wine.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Heidi Roizen. I'm a partner at DFJ, which is right across the street, conveniently located. And I think I was asked tonight, and thank you, Karen and Churchill Club. You guys are amazing, and it's just so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. I think I was asked tonight because I am one of those people who believes there's no such thing in life as a transaction, and everything is a relationship. And I'm all about relationships, and so that's why I'm here, I'm pretty sure. But I'm also an experienced moderator, and I'll tell you as a moderator, the thing you worry about is that you're going to get, assigned to something where no one has anything to say. Tonight is not that night, I can assure you. These guys are amazing. We're going to have a lot to talk about. I really want this to be interactive, so we're going to roll. I've got plenty of questions, but please be prepared with questions. If you want to break in, if you disagree with something that's being said, please, jump up and down or let me know and join the conversation. You guys should also, we should challenge each other. Mm-hmm. And there will be plenty of time for Q&A as well. So I'm going to start with Keith. So Keith, as you know, never eats alone. And I think it's not surprising that I met Keith over a dinner that Keith organized many, many years ago. Who better to represent the topic of relationships? He literally wrote the book on it. #1 best-selling author from the New York Times list. He believes that relationships are the currency of success. Is that correct?
I think that's absolutely true.
I think that is absolutely true. So we throw around the word relationship. It used to be networking, but that sort of became a gross term that nobody wanted to say.
Wish we could reinvent it to
we need a
have
new
appropriate,
word. So I think we've kind of settled on relationship, but now that word gets thrown around a lot. So can you break that down to us? For you, what does it mean when we talk about relationships?
Well, if you think about relationships as I call them permission to influence, permission to forgive, permission for opportunity. I mean, the relationship is really the core currency of everything you want to do in an increasingly matrixed world. I do a lot. My primary company that I built for 15 years is called Ferrazzi Greenlight. And we work with predominantly Fortune 500, 1,000 companies, helping them accelerate growth strategies in a number of different ways, but at the core of all of our intellectual property is we're a research institute of changing relationships and collaboration. And in an increasingly matrixed world, everything's about relationships inside of companies. Productivity is relationships. Try to get something done because you actually think you have sufficient budget and accountability and authority to get something done in your companies. Nobody does. Nobody does. It's about your capacity to marshal people and relationships. And frankly, in the high turnover environment that we're in here in the Bay Area, but just in general, if you think that you as a leader or a manager have authority over another individual, it's the relationship that you have with an employee that unleashes the productivity of that individual. So when I say relationships really are the critical core, and then sales, of course, we know relationships are critical because the commoditization of all of your products or the fast follower opportunity, if you don't have the relationship, and what this guy brings along, I've always done all of my work in our company in the B2B world, and then this guy comes along and says, okay, so maybe you're not in front of your client or your customer, but how do you use the data to build the intimacy that is a relationship? So the thin slice of a relationship for me are 4 words. Number 1 is intimacy. A real relationship has intimacy. A real relationship has care. These are all the same thing. The real relationship has give a damn. Right? I look at you and I connect. That's a real relationship. And anything short of that is not a real relationship. That's a transaction. Mm-hmm. The second word, now the question is, how do you get that? And unfortunately, in our incredibly narcissistic, crowded world today, you don't get it by walking up to, what's your name? Melissa, and saying, Melissa, I want to be your friend. Right? Because nobody wants another friend. And because we're all too damn busy. The question is, what can you do for me? And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality. Therefore, if I want a relationship with Melissa, I need to be asking myself a very simple question. How can I be of service? Because if I approach the relationship by how can I be of service, all of a sudden Melissa's ears will perk up and say, okay, I'll give him a moment. And now if someone gives me a moment and I actually follow it with authenticity, if I follow it with what you did at your tables, and I hope some of you did, where you actually had a real introduction, then what the next thing is people will say, huh, I like that person. And the great news is that relationships are core to our DNA. We're tribally oriented. And if you get the permission through generosity to trigger the intimacy through being authentic, then you have connection. Right? So you don't get that permission until you lead with generosity. You follow with intimacy. You follow with vulnerability, because vulnerability is empathy, and you become a part of someone's tribe, and that is the connection. That's the intimacy. So then you go on, and then you get the high-powered relationships, which actually have candor, which very few relationships have.
Can I stop you for a second, though? Because I think Silicon Valley is an interesting place, because I think if you ask most of the people in Silicon Valley, how did you get ahead? It's not work-life balance. It's not whatever. It's work-life integration, right? We're the same whether we're in our work life or in our personal life, and we do tend to have intimacy. But there's a point. One of my partners, it's a call. He's like oversharing, too much, right? Went too far. And I remember being in a pitch meeting once where a guy walked in and he had a black eye. Like, guy I didn't know walked into a pitch meeting to pitch me to give him money, and he had a black eye. And I said, where'd you get that black eye? And he goes, I got really drunk and I had a bar fight last night. Okay. That guy did not get funded, okay? Not by me anyway. Maybe he got funded by someone else. So I think intimacy is a very...
I don't know. Well, hold on a second. There's a distinction between oversharing and stupidity.
Yeah.
Right?
But I mean, where do you draw the line on this
what
stuff?
you just
How
did
intimate is okay?
Well, when it's a character defect, when you're sharing a fundamental character defect,
Yeah.
right? This guy couldn't hold his liquor, or he has a temper. What kind of a leader is this person going to be, right?
Okay.
I mean, you got to ask yourself that question.
Okay.
The fact that I've suffered a breakup in my relationship, does that make me a bad leader or somebody uninvestable? Now, if I went on and told you, 5 reasons that made you question, etc. But look, there is a truism. The truism is that people connect through empathy. People connect through empathy. Empathy, the fastest accelerant to having empathy between two individuals. And again, it's all based on tribalism. Are you in my tribe or are you in somebody else's? And if you can create us, which is we're a part of a tribe, if you can create us, you win and you have permission to influence, permission to forgive. All this wonderful permission is gained through being a part of someone's tribe. Empathy is the accelerant to that, and it's exciting what data is going to be, what should be bringing to the table, not transactional data bullshit, creepy stuff, right?
Yeah.
But this kind of stuff that matters to me. So it's all about creation of empathy. And when somebody says, I just had a bar fight, why does that create empathy?
Unless you just recently had a bar fight too, and then,
different
tribes.
If you went
not
on,
our tribe.
Keith
different
doesn't
tribe.
fight. He's as it
I'm
says,
a lover- I'm a lover, not a fighter.
let me bring
But hold
Rishi
on a second,
Dave
Heidi.
into this.
Let me just
Yeah.
say on this. If the guy then went on to say, you know what, I was at some bar and some jackass drunk came up to the woman that came up to some beautiful lady sitting next to me, and she was just trying to have an evening, and I told him that he really should leave her alone, and he sucker punched me, right? Would that stop you from investing in this person? No, you would have just accelerated empathy.
Absolutely.
There's lots of ways that you can shortcut to empathy, but you're really shortcutting to are you us? We're trying to create us.
I agree. Rishi, I feel you want to.
Yes.
I feel you want to respond.
Say something, Rishi.
Yes, I will.
And you have everyone's bios in the handouts tonight, but Rishi is. I want to say that if Keith comes to this from the people side, Rishi, you've been pitched as the guy who comes to this from the data side.
Yes.
Right. It's all about data.
Rishi is not a person.
I'm
He's
a
the
data.
data.
I am a data
He's
point
data.
for Keith.
So respond to
Yeah,
Keith
I will
then.
respond to that and talk about the data piece. But one thing I do want to say about what Keith just said is that what's interesting is that if you believe that to succeed with intimacy, with empathy, most of us just let it happen over time. So you think about your closest friends, and shout out to all my undergrad friends who are here today.
Half the room went to college with him.
Thank you. But we have a long time together, and that's how we built intimacy. The important thing about what Keith talks about, and what I've experienced working with Keith, is that there are techniques like the personal professional check-in we just had that help you accelerate the much needed intimacy, authenticity, and empathy that you need, but you have to accelerate it. And so I think that's a very important thing to really accelerate your company as well. Now, going back to the data piece, what we look at and what I look at is what is the marriage between data and analytics and relationships? And what are best-in-class companies doing in the modern world when it comes to fully leveraging the techniques that Keith just talked about? And what we see best-in-class companies do is they have an incredible ability to look at the data they have within the company, whether it's data that's coming from their different systems, like the finance systems or CRM systems or procurement systems, data that they're getting from their websites or social media, as well as data that they're using from third parties. Bringing that data together to get a holistic view of the ecosystem of relationships they have as companies. Then really finding what I would say truth and meaning from that data by doing the right type of analytics. And then once they do that, then understanding who they should engage with from the techniques that Keith just described. So let me give you a very practical example.
Can you give us an example? Because that's
yes.
a lot of data.
Let me give you a very practical example. So take a telecom company. that's really best in class at this. What this company did was they historically tried to figure out what relationships from a sales and marketing perspective are most important by simply looking at the demographics, like what the data says from a demographic perspective or what companies were doing in the past. When they were able to understand and marry the data they had with third-party data and build analytics to predict where these companies are going, so not just where they've been, but where they're going, and whether they're growing in a direction that'll help them grow and them succeed as a company, they were able to really prioritize the most important relationships that they should focus on, and they're able to point their sales teams to those important relationships, leveraging that analytics, and increase the close rates and eventually grow the company. They increased the close rates by over 17%. Now you can imagine if you're a big global company, like a big telecom company, that's a pretty significant amount, simply by leveraging the data, the analytics, and understanding who to focus on.
So can you help us understand though, like what is actionable? You get this data and you say, and I mean data is powerful and it's also really scary. Like it's one thing if a friend of mine says, I know you like Jimmy Choo's, I saw these Jimmy Choo's, I think you'd like them, versus like I'm on a website and suddenly it says, look at these Jimmy Choo's because they know I buy Jimmy Choo's. It's a little scary when data is used in a sort of a non-personal way. What's actionable about that data? Like, how do you transform? I'm getting data and I'm saying, this is the important person and they like Jimmy Choo's. Like, what do you do with that? You don't have to use Jimmy Choo's as your example. That's purely my example.
Yes, yes.
You can pick something else.
Yeah, I think
49ers or I don't know, something.
I think the most important thing is understanding what business problem you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And that's how you get actionable. So let me give you another example. There was a company that really wanted to figure out, they sold to big, large, complex companies that were global. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to figure out who is the exact buying center or the exact person in that company who can buy our solution. Mm-hmm. Now, in the old world, without using the analytics, they would, cold call the customer, map out the org structure, put it in the CRM system, and just kind of figure out over time who the right person is. Instead, what they did was they leveraged the data, they pulled in third-party data, and they understood the entire network and family tree of the companies they were trying to target, thousands of companies. Mm-hmm. And they looked at where the executives sit, where the different people buy across those companies, and a whole host of other data. And they were able to find those buying centers at the level of thousands of companies in milliseconds, and they're able to update that real time. So when the sales team is trying to figure out who to grow a relationship with, who to build intimacy with, who to network into, they knew exactly who to target.
I want to bring this back to some stuff that is just a little bit more plain talk for a moment, which is that anybody in this room is a B2B salesperson. Nobody sells to a company. Procter & Gamble does not sell to Walmart. D&B does not sell to Coca-Cola. People buy from people, okay? And that's what Rishi's saying. So the question is, and like I have an unfair disadvantage. I'm a high-tech startup CEO, and we sell our software solution, which is a solution to onboard new employees faster. It's a very simple little HRIS system. But within the Fortune 100, there is always one person I can call and say, will you please figure out who the buyer is for me of the product that I have? Somebody runs the onboarding process in your company. Will you please get me to them and make them have a demo with me, right? And it's easy for me because of the relationship. And now I have an internal evangelist who is going to seek around and find the right specific buyer and will get that person on the phone for me. That's apparently, I didn't realize that, but that's not easy for most high-tech startups to do, to be able to pick up the phone and get to the buyer instantly, right? And then to be able to have social currency, because what's happened is a warm call of the person I called is saying to this person, do me a favor, take the demo with Keith's company, right? So now I'm even coming with currency behind me, a sense of that, which again is an undue advantage.
Yeah.
This is all possible in a world where you can begin to look at everything from LinkedIn profiles to Facebook profiles and histories of relationships. And there's a company called Relsi. I know you guys know Relsi. And you look at everybody who everybody knows, and you look at what people need. And all of a sudden, you're building this idea of what's the fastest path to find a currency trigger to build a relationship with a person. The last thing I want to say before we go on, there's people already raising their hands, which is great, is other than that people don't buy, companies don't buy from companies, people buy from people, and you have to understand that, is that because you're being very purposeful and calculated about how you manage relationships does not make it fake. It makes it important. How many of you in this room have a to-do list? Right. How many of you have a people plan? So a people plan is recognizing that if I asked you, are people important to your success? Yes or no? Yes. Who are the 25 most important people in 2016 to your success? Who are the 25 most important people to your success in 2016? And what is your strategy to accelerate your relationship with those 25 individuals? And when I say success, I could mean your 5th grade teachers, your son's 5th grade teacher, because you want to make sure that your son's going to have a complicated year this year. He's in a new school. It's going to be difficult for him. I need to get to know Miss Maley, which is what my dad did to my 5th grade teacher, because when I went to a new school in 5th grade, he got to know Miss Maley.
So, but you're talking about building currency, right? I mean, because currency is an interesting word, right? And I get 2 questions a lot about currency. One is, how do you build it? And the other one is, do you have to repay it? Does currency have to be balanced? I mean, how do you determine how much currency to spend and where that balance is?
Well, you prioritize. I mean, again, it's not bad to prioritize relationships, A's, B's, and C's. Of your 25 people, who are the 5 A priorities? If you spend more time with your child than you do the neighbor's child, at least I hope so, and that's creepy, right? Because your child is a A-level priority to you. And your neighbor's child may be not even on the radar screen. So it's not a problem to prioritize relationships. It's not a problem to put lists around relationships. It's not a problem to put a relational quality score, which in a B2B world, if I said to the head of IBM North America, what's the relationship that you have with Coca-Cola? And he could push a button and say, my relationship score from a -1 to 3, 3 being a trusted advisor for all the key relationships, -1 being a strained relationship, 0, I don't know you, 1, we've met, 2 is an acquaintance. He could say our average weighted relationship score is a 1.5. It's not even thought about or talked about, because people don't take relationships as seriously as they need to be taken. They take them serendipitously, like Rishi just suggested, and it either happens or it doesn't, and it happens over time. And he's coming along and saying, no, it can happen purposefully, and you can put data to it.
Yeah, and if you want to scale that to the size of a big, large global corporation, and you want to point your salespeople, for example, to the right set of relationships that they should be developing, that's where the data and the analytics comes into play, where you can help your salespeople leveraging the LinkedIn data at scale, leveraging all the data you're generating at scale, and leveraging analytics to say, okay, here are the 12 that you have to grow your valuable relationships with.
So that informs the who. Does it also inform the what?
So here are the 12 people. The currency.
What do you do with those 12 people? What do they value? Is that in that as well?
Absolutely. With the analytics, and it's not just your own analytics, it's looking at what they're looking at on your website, as well as looking at third-party data, and actually profiling what would they be most interested in? What line of business? So I'll give you a great example that we do at Dun & Bradstreet is that in our salespeople's CRM system, they can see not only who they should target, but also what line of business that customer is most apt to purchase from that salesperson. Mm-hmm. So the salesperson knows who to target and with what.
Mm-hmm. Now I know there was somebody with a burning question
gentleman in the
out
back.
there. You
yeah.
wanna pipe in. Go for it. No,
don't hold
go
it back.
for it.
Yeah,
Go
I
for
was
it.
just intrigued by the introduction.
Wait. It better be a good question, though. You're
You're
setting a tone for the whole damn evening.
I know.
So it's got to be
Don't mess
short
it up.
and really good.
And tell us who you are, because we're
my
all
name's
about
Sean
relationships
Hare.
here.
I'm with SanDisk.
Okay.
I just love the introduction, and what I was calling to the audience was a contrast in introductions. Keith talked about giving freely, not expecting return short term, just kind of giving. And then I heard Rishi talk about more analytics than getting, and it just struck me as kind of an interesting contrast. I'd like to see a conversation reconciling those points.
I have a way to tee this up.
Yep.
And I'm going to bridge back and
And
forth
I don't mean
between.
to be offensive. Fair observation?
No, I have
No.
a good response as well. So.
Well, and I think we can bridge back and forth between the data and, anyway, on the currency question that Heidi was talking about. In advance of meeting, let's say my company wants to help you accelerate the onboarding of new engineers at SanDisk, all right? I'm going to do my research. Never before have I been able to do my research better than I can today. I always show up at a meeting, and what I'm looking for is, in advance, my research is asking, what are the 5 packets of generosity I'm bringing to the table? And what's interesting is I'm looking personally and professionally at you. If I could figure out that you like Jimmy Choo's, which would be kind of cool and kinky, you know? But if I could figure out that you like Jimmy Choo's, then it's size 8. Men's size 8, right? And if I could figure out those kind of intricate things based on more and more detailed research, then I know what I'm dealing with here, and I know how to have a conversation. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who's also a cross-dresser in San Francisco, right? And the two of you can have a lovely evening. But that's great, and I can do that, and I want to generously be of service, and I'm going to find out if you've got a daughter applying to Yale because a friend of mine told me that, and I happen to know the general head of admissions, and I want to know everything about you personally and professionally if I possibly can, so I can be of service and you'll pay attention, right? And then once I can show up with 5 packets of generosity, I'll probably hit on 1 or 2 of them. By the way, of the 5 packets of generosity, only 2 of them are allowed to be something that I'll make money from, right? So if I'm showing up at a B2B world to sell, only 2 of them are allowed to be something that I can make money from. It could be introductions, they could be additional thought leadership, they could be anything, right? Now, as soon as I show up with currency, he's going to let his guard down and say, whoa, I want to get to know this person, right? And then guess what's going to happen? He's going to tell me what he really wants. And as soon as he starts telling me what he really wants, my information increases. So, Rishi's talking about data that you can collect about somebody, but what you really want is you want them to start volunteering data because you've been generous to them enough that they start giving you more information about themselves. And then by the time you're done, you're having a long, slow dinner and you're talking and you're commiserating about recent divorces. And you're talking about, how to get through times like this, right? I mean, that's when the relationship gets solidified.
And can I jump in on this? So Adam Grant wrote a great book called Give and Take. And it's a really interesting book, and part of one of the main premise of the book is that givers will do better, right? And there's a great book called Influence, which talks about the rule of reciprocity. And for any of you old enough to remember being in airports and having the Hare Krishnas give you that little flower, they're not giving you that little flower because you actually want that little flower. In fact, the way they have enough flowers is they just go to the garbage bin and they get the flowers back out because people throw the flowers away, because the last thing you need when you're getting on an airplane is a little flower. But they give you this flower because it's human nature. If someone gives you something, you respond by wanting to give them something. So it's actually psychologically the rule of reciprocity says that you will be more inclined to help someone if they offer to help you first, which sounds sort of manipulative and cynical. And so let me put a nice flavor on this too. I tell my students all the time, really the rule of reciprocity works in your favor because it also establishes that you have value and you're being thoughtful. I think to Keith's point, if I'm ever meeting with someone, I do some homework. And I have to admit, most people don't do homework. They don't go look at your LinkedIn profile. They don't go look at Facebook if you can get on.
They barely know what your company
They don't
does.
look at Twitter. They don't read if you do your homework, I say to my students, just do 2 things. And your mother told you this in 2nd grade, and I'm telling you again now, do your homework and say thank you. You do those 2 things, you're ahead of 95% of the crowd. And so if you're going in a meeting and you haven't looked at someone's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, website, every possible thing you can do to get to know what is that person about, what's important to them, you'll have so much more of a productive meeting.
I mean,
and
just
if
think
you
about
walk
the
in thinking,
mutual
what can I do to
connections.
help?
You're
with
warming the cold call if you have mutual connection, because you're instantly saying, you're of my social tribe, so-and-so knows you, I know so-and-so, that's acceptable, now I feel a little bit more comfortable. And in the worst case scenario, you're basically saying, okay, I can't be a jackass to this person, I'll get back to so-and-so, right? But the question of authenticity is critical here. You're allowed to be calculated as long as you're authentic and actually wanting to build a real relationship. That needs to be a
And you're
critical
using
piece.
data, by the way, which
I mean,
is more data than ever's been available.
The way I would
right?
link this all together is that you're a large global enterprise, let's say, for example, or a decent-sized startup, and you want to grow relationships leveraging these engagement mechanisms, authenticity, empathy, etc. I link it up in a very simple way. When you want to do it at the level of an enterprise, looking at the entire ecosystem of relationships, whether it's with customers, partners, vendors, even within employees. Start with the data. What is the right analytics to help you prioritize who you should connect with? So what vendor is going to be the best one to work with that'll mitigate risk? What customer would provide the biggest set of opportunities for you, or what partners, right? And with what opportunity? So this customer is the best customer for your services with this specific line of business. But that's not enough. That just tells you the who and with what. That's when you need to really engage in all the things that we're talking about here once you've identified that, with the authenticity, with the reciprocity, all those type of things once you've done that. But today what we can do is we can do it at a massive scale and materially move the growth of big enterprises by leveraging the data and the analytics.
So is there a point where you have so much data that you lose authenticity? I mean, that's one of the big questions people say is, I got more data than ever. I got my kids always say to me, Mom, you got 5,000 Facebook friends. No one has 5,000 friends. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't either, but I have 5,000 Facebook friends, right? We have so much data today. We have so much connectivity. We're always inundated with stuff. How do you weed through that? And what are, especially for people who are individuals here, I mean, we're talking about big corporations, but we're also talking about individuals. We're all accessing a lot of data. What's the actionable go-to technology that you're using to inform your relationships? Is technology a friend or foe in the battle to sort of find to create meaningful relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is an incredible benefit. As I mentioned.
Did you say a bad rap? What did you say?
Incredible benefit.
Yeah,
benefit.
Absolutely. I think technology is given a bad rap.
Yeah,
it is given a bad rap in this issue.
Because it does inform the who and the with what that allows you to do the engagement. Now, your question about people are overwhelmed by data. There's too much data. Yeah. My phone fell. And that there's too much data. You
can tell he's from New York. Look at that tie. He's wearing a tie. I love it.
That's right.
It's a nice tie.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful tie.
Thank you. Yeah. I lived here for a while, but then when I moved to New York, I went with a skinny tie. Now, the question of having too much data, a lot of that is being very focused on what key problem you're trying to solve. And using that to actually inform what data you use. Like, I need to find out the exact business buyer in all these entities, or I need to find out who the right set of people are for my services. That helps you inform what analytics you use and what data you ultimately get. But end of the day, I think that companies will never be able to keep up with all the data that's out there. Neither will individuals. And typically, at any given time, there's just a small subset of data that companies are using. I think the big differentiator for companies, in order to actually pinpoint those right relationships and those right opportunities, will be their ability to work in a very fast-changing world and be very agile and be very lean and have a culture that can adapt to these changing technologies and these changing data platforms so that they're able to incorporate those very quickly into the business purpose that they're trying to do. And that's ultimately what it'll be about, and less about using the latest and greatest technology or leveraging all the data. And that's what we're seeing best-in-class companies doing.
And Keith?
Well, I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking what would be interesting to these people. I really am, because I'm trying to be of service to you, and you've come here. And I want to keep going back and forth between the power of big data and what it does in enterprises, et cetera, to what matters to Melissa. The first step is you got to get clear on what your goals are, who you're trying to sell to for what reason. So here again, a little thing. I've got a company. It does. It accelerates helping managers be better coaches during the onboarding process. Okay. Now I look at this audience, and my first question is, who here can either purchase my product, right? Who here has, accelerating people coming on board in the next, SanDisk has a bunch, right? So SanDisk has a bunch of engineers coming on board. So that's somebody I want to talk to, right? Or what's interesting is Sherry may have a brother who has a company that could buy my product, right? Now, I get lost there. Like, I could have looked at a list of everybody who came and saw SanDisk on the list and say, that's a potential target. But with his tools and rel-size tools and LinkedIn and other things, if I really wanted to spend the time and if there were algorithms associated with that search, I could find out who you could make a referral to that could be of service to my business. Now, once I've done that and I've identified the targets, and target is not a bad word, it's just an identification of an individual that now I want to go be generous to, right? So now, how do I be generous to somebody who could be a buyer of my product? Not by selling them my product, but by gathering as much information about them as possible. Now, I've got additional currency. I mean, being a little bit of tonight I'm a star because I'm on a stage with you, and so that increases my currency with you. But if I'm just a salesman walking into the door, what's my currency? What do I have to offer this person? How does research and data, LinkedIn is an amazing platform for it. If you can get into Facebook and figure out what's going on there, it's amazing. It's a good platform. What are the, rel-sci, et cetera? What are the currencies? The easiest currency is mutual relationships, friend to friends. Who do I know together, right? That could be one. What do we have in common? That could be one, right? And then once I start evaluating, or one could be just like, here's the great question, where do you want to go next? I promise you, anybody you're selling to in a B2B environment wants a different job at some point soon. Could be in their own company, or it could be outside of their company. And if you realize that when someone's buying my product, you know what they're buying? They're buying their future career success. Think about that. They're either going to drill me down on price, and that's how they're going to look good in their company, or something I'm going to be doing in my engagement with them is going to make them look good in their company. So now if I realize that what they're buying is their career success, now how do I be of service to them? How do I get a word into their boss that they're amazing? How do I give them thought leadership? In large organizations, you could be selling to somebody 5 layers down from the CEO who doesn't even understand the CEO's agenda. And if you help them realize that they can actually achieve their CEO's agenda by buying your product and look good to their CEO, even though they've never met them, and give them an accelerated path to that. So it's just as simple as you get the target with data, you figure out how to serve them with data, you serve them a little bit and tease them with the idea that you can be of service to them, then they give you more information and more data, and then you can continue to serve them more deeply and richly. And the next thing you know, as I said, you're having a long, slow dinner talking about your divorces.
So I want to touch on something. First of all, the amount of work you do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's a lot of work that goes behind that, right? There's a lot of data analysis that goes into doing that. And then the second thing, and I hear this from a lot of people, is, well, I can't do that. I don't have the personality. I don't have the charisma. I don't have the skill set. Is that a reasonable thing to say? And what would be an actionable for those people who are sitting here going, I can't do this? What can you give them something actionable to help them break through that? How do you break through that?
But that's the beauty of it, is that when you've done the research, when you've looked on LinkedIn, when you've looked at their background, when you've looked at the network of relationships they have, when you've understood what they have a high propensity to buy, you don't need to have charisma.
Right, charisma doesn't trump
you don't need to have charisma.
Charisma is just one form of currency.
Right. You know who they are, you know what they want, and you know their motivation. You can talk directly to their needs. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have charisma.
Look, a shy person can buy my product just as easily as a charismatic person, and I want to be of service to whoever can buy my product.
Yep.
Right? So if somebody can buy my product, and so it really is not an issue of charisma any longer, it's an issue of really understanding what people want and need. There are, again, truisms. Everybody wants a better, different job. Right? So if you can think about how to be of service to get somebody to the next level in their career, even if it's a little bit in what you're offering them, that's a good thing. Everybody has people they love and care about, and if you can think of a way to be of service to people they love and care about. Now, you don't get the permission to ask them who they love and care about that might need your help until you've been on some foundational currency to somebody. So you build, it's a ladder. The more you be of currency at a foundational level, the more you get permission to learn more about them. The more you learn more about them, the more you can be of service to them, and it just keeps climbing up that currency ladder.
So
Yeah, I think.
And
I
don't
think,
be an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, and, like, be
Well-
a real person that cares about people, and then that's really important. If you're just using this stuff for manipulation, it'll smell on you a mile away, and it'll all backfire.
So we talked earlier about givers, and as Adam Grant says, givers are the best kind. But we've all dealt with takers, right? We've all dealt with people who actually, go beyond, right? How do you draw the line? How do you manage? You've got tons and tons of relationships. How do you manage the relationships that aren't productive for you? What do you do about those?
You want to talk about that? You got one?
Go for it.
Look, the answer is you don't tell them. And I made that mistake way too many times, where I let people know how they are being of disservice to me.
And I've witnessed that.
Yeah.
It's very, no, not personally.
Has he ever told you that?
Not
No.
personally, but I've witnessed that.
No, but that I'm paid for. I'm paid when I'm coaching an executive team. I'm paid to tell them that they're not of service to me.
That's true.
And they're not adhering to the rules. But look, has anybody ever had any experience with the program called Al-Anon? Al-Anon is a program for anybody who's in a relationship with an alcoholic, and you're desperately trying to change them, and you can't change them, and you go to this program to learn, let go, right? Let go. And one of the best rules of relationship that I have learned when you're struggling with somebody who's not of service to you, when you're struggling with a taker, etc., is to do two things: forgive and let go. Just forgive and let go. And it's interesting. Sometimes when you forgive and let go, it actually changes them, because you're no longer gripping tight on wanting to change them. But you do no service to yourself to walk out of the relationship and on the way saying, this is why I'm leaving the relationship. Now, unless, of course, it's a divorce proceeding and you have to do that in court. But there's no reason to be as transparent about that, because you will end up creating negative relationships and animosity in the world that you don't need. And this is not what I used to believe, but I've come to believe that. Forgive and let go is the best way to exit a relationship. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for you, Rishi. What happens when the data contradicts what your gut says? Or when the data contradicts what your customer's gut says? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think you can't rely 100% on the data, because there's a lot of things that the data doesn't know. So let me give you a great example, is that many companies will use data to, let's say, prioritize, like I mentioned, the people that they should have the salespeople target. But many times, if you don't add a layer of actually talking to the salespeople or understanding the specific situation beyond just what the data tells you, you don't get a full context of what's going on. And so I think it's an art and a science. The science takes you so far, and then you need to bring in the art, which is what we talk about in the engagement piece. So while I can, at the level of a corporation, determine, based on the analytics, what accounts we can go after and with what, until the salesperson is actually engaged and has uncovered those needs through everything that Keith has talked about, you never truly know what the opportunity is. And so you have to marry those two together. But best-in-class companies, they do that, and then they kind of see what happens and what doesn't happen, and then they feed that back into their models so they can do better next time. And it's a constant learning environment.
And last question for me, and then I'd love to open it to the rest of you. Personal life, business life, relationships, same rules or different rules? Do you apply the same skills? Is it all the same? Or is there your personal life and your business life, and you do things differently?
What kind of data tracking do you do on your family?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank God for Facebook, and or I wouldn't know what my
You've got a
kids
bunch
are
of girls. Are
doing.
you on there? I mean, they're not old enough to be worried about their social media profiles and that kind of stuff.
Yes, I don't allow them on social media right now. So
Well, mine are 20 and 22, and trust me, I get all my data from.
There was a famous quote that Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a social media guy.
Great
He used
guy.
to say when he was trying to, back in the day when he was trying to convince companies that they should be on Twitter. This is back when social media was new, and companies would go to him and say, hey, I don't see the ROI in doing this. And he would say, well, tell me the ROI on your mom.
Wow.
Of what?
The
On your
ROI
mom.
on your mom.
Oh.
Where he's kind of saying, look, these are relationships, and
Yeah.
these are the things you have to do, and these are things that are very critical. And so, the way I look at it is that it's a blurring line between personal and professional. And as we've talked about, you almost have to leverage that intimacy and that empathy with all the relationships you have, because in order to be authentic, it almost needs to be almost like a personal relationship.
When we teach, when we coach sales forces, my Ferrazzi Greenlight company, when it coaches sales forces, particularly in B2B sales, there's a formula we say BR equals PR. Business relationships are personal relationships. They are. And if they're not, you're missing an element of currency that you need to have. If you don't walk into a room and create a real connection where someone's going to give you more information, where someone's going to give you the permission to influence them. If in the middle of the sales call, the person doesn't say, wait, let me just stop you. You're really not on target in terms of our strategy. Let me readjust your sales pitch so that you can sell me in a way that I'll hear it. That's what a relationship does. People will stop you in the middle of what you just say and say, no, that doesn't make sense. Here's some more data, now do it again. Right? You get that when you've developed, you could at the minimum call it rapport, all the way to a relationship. So the relationship and the way you do that is, again, you're tribal animals. Everybody in this room is born 70,000 years ago in a tribe. And all I've got to do is get you to relax into what I call gravity, meaning you're naturally inclined to want to find us in your life. And none of us find us enough in our lives today. We don't, our families don't eat together. We don't have practice being relational with our families anymore. Our clubs don't have the same power. Our church groups don't have the same power. So we're out in the world fighting against a world that isn't connected and developed in the way that we are basically hardwired to be. So if you walk into the room and you create an environment around yourself that invites people in, you will have a huge advantage in your life. You will have a huge advantage in your life, and that's an accelerant to a personal relationship, which will just be the fuel to have all the things you want out of your life, as long as you're leading with authenticity and service. You'll have the permission to say to somebody, you got your head up your ass. You have that permission, and you need that, because that's what great teams have to have. That's what we coach Bob and his team on, and Rishi and his team on. Yeah, I'm dying to hear what y'all are thinking.
No.
You're paying attention, which is
let's
good.
open it
I mean,
up
I
to
see your
questions.
eyes are on me, not, there's like only one guy over there on text, but anyway.
All right, questions? Anybody? Yeah, start us off.
Chris, hold on. Yeah.
Yeah? Stand up? Stand up? Oh. So you guys took quite different approaches to relationships, sort of internal with onboarding people and the sort of sales organization, and then talking about personal relationships. I'm kind of curious how you guys, it's a two-part question, seeing your perspectives of how you manage relationships yourselves and your actual practice of keeping track of the top 25 people that you focus on, maybe how you take notes, personal notes, mental notes, and how you adjust that focus of who you're trying to build relationships with, and how that blends into possibly best practices in business, where you can kind of you can possibly even train people better to focus on those relationships and be able to adapt with the new data, the new technology that's being leveraged at a really large scale.
I mean, I could just start by saying the answer to the question I wrote in a book called Never Eat Alone, right? It's everything that are the best practices for curating what I call a relationship action plan. The relationship action plan makes you recognize that your people plan is crucial to your success. Now, how are you going to curate that? And I had to rewrite it this past year. If any of you read Never Eat Alone when it came out 10 years ago, I didn't have Facebook, LinkedIn. My friend Reid Hoffman was just starting LinkedIn. All that stuff was brand new. So we had to rewrite the book totally in the data era. Because, but what's interesting is the data era doesn't change the fundamentals of leading with generosity and following with authenticity. That's crucial. In terms of, look, if everybody just did this, before the end of the year, please write the 25 names of the most critical individuals for your dreams and goals for next year. Who are the most important 25 names? Of the top 5, please make one of them your spouse. Right? And make some of them your in-laws if necessary, or whatever they are. But really be thoughtful and argue and debate who the 25 most important people are and think of the 5 A-level priorities. And then ask yourself, how in the coming year do I serve the hell out of them? How do I be deeply generous? How do I open up a wholly different connection with those individuals? And I dare you to make sure of the 25 that 3 of them you don't know. You don't know them yet. They don't know you. They might, just make sure that some of them are stretch individuals who you've maybe bumped into each other a little bit. And make sure at least 1 or 2 of them are people that you have a current strained relationship with. Okay? Write those names down and make a commitment to be of service and make a commitment to accelerate your connectivity with those individuals. Now they're goal aligned. They're all focused. You start with your goals. What do you want to achieve in life? I want to have a happy family. I want to have a happy marriage. I want to get that next job. I want to sell big. I want to get the commission. I want to raise my fund. I want to, blah, 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 whatever it is. You start with your goals, you match the names, and you go serve them. And I promise you, a year from now, if you actually continue to iterate that list and focus on this, you'll have a fundamentally different year.
I'm going to throw 2 things at you. One thing is I fundamentally believe people are people first, and they are their job second, and it's a way distant second. So the more you can understand who the person is and keep track, and people, again, because of data, people share important things on Facebook. Yeah. They share when they become empty nesters. They share when their parents die. They share a lot of things that I believe you can connect with someone when you're a person first. The problem is that also people, for the most part, use the most convenient to them form of communication. So I'll give you an example. Facebook. It's your birthday on Facebook. You get
Click.
1,000
clicks,
likes, and hey, yo, it's your birthday, yay. Do you even read those? I mean, at a certain point, it's like it's meaningless to you because it didn't take anybody any effort to, I can go on and click 50 likes in 2 minutes, right? It's no big deal. But when you go out of your way to recognize that people like different forms of communication, right? Some people are phone people, some people are email people, some people are send them a gift people. If you understand how to communicate with someone in their form of communication, that's way more powerful than doing something in the form that's most convenient to you. Mm-hmm. And so I just encourage you to think about that. And I mean, I know I see it because, on Facebook, I get a cajillion things on Facebook, a cajillion things on LinkedIn, because it's so easy for people. But even for someone to find my email address and send me an email, I'm going to be way more responsive to that because my life works on email. And I'm actually pretty damn easy to find because I have a unique first name, last name combination. And so really you only need to Google my name and you can find my email address. I'm going to respond to email way before I'm going to respond to LinkedIn. Other people are phone people, right? There are people who don't respond to email, but if you pick up the phone and you can call them, they're going to be more responsive on phone. So I think this is another piece of being respectful of the other person, is understanding what form of communication works for them. And I call it leading with your humanity. If you can lead with your humanity, and I'll just give you an example of one time it didn't work. So I'm a venture capitalist. People think venture capitalists are like, we're like the troll on the bridge, and there's the big pile of money behind us, and if you can think of the magic words to say the troll will let you on the bridge, and you can get the pile of money, and then never have to talk to the troll again. That's how most entrepreneurs view venture capitalists. But how a venture capitalist views the entrepreneur is, I'm sitting there across the table from you, and if I actually give you money, I'm going to spend the next 10 years of my life working with you, justifying to my partners and my LPs why I gave you that money, and trying to help you be successful. And so we are not at all about just unlocking the money. We are about the relationship. So I had someone pitch me one time. I set up this meeting with this person, and I showed up at the meeting, and I was in tears. I was in tears because I had just dropped my oldest child off for college, and I'd scheduled this meeting right after dropping my child off at their dorm, realizing I wasn't going to see them for 3 months, and I was a bawling mass of goo. And I sat down in front of this entrepreneur and I said, I'm really sorry I'm crying here, but I just dropped my kid off at college, my oldest kid. I didn't realize how emotional I was going to be. And he said, okay, well then let's get started. And he opened his laptop and he started pitching me. And in that moment I thought, I am never giving you money because you had no, like not even, I'm sorry, do you want to reschedule this? And because I was judging that person on their ability to connect with human beings, they got an immediate fail, where that person saw me as the ogre on the bridge with the pile of money behind me. So I just, I really do believe, and this goes to this thing about it's about the person, it's about the intimacy of we are all people first. I absolutely believe we're all people first. And if you can connect at a human level with people, you just, worst case, you'll maybe make a new friend, right? Or you'll have a great conversation. But I really believe there's almost no business that gets done without the human connection, a coincident if not first.
I agree, and one thing I would add to that I think, and I'm still surprised that people underestimate this, is how important and how effective it is to manage your online brand. And what I mean by that is you can control and you can write about what you're passionate about. You can curate your LinkedIn profile with things that you are passionate about, interesting interviews you've done, videos you've done, etc. You can be on Twitter and curate a set of content that you believe is important and talk about things that are important to you. And you can build your whole passions online. And that becomes a very powerful way for people to understand what you can offer to them and what they can offer to you. And I personally, and I know Keith and Heidi have as well, spent a lot of time with that. And I personally found it very rewarding. So when I want to build intimacy or want to engage with people, they know me really well and know what I'm passionate about. And that helps accelerate that relationship.
Although, okay, I'm going to break in on this though, because I think a lot of people are, and I caution my students. There's a point at which you put too much stuff
Absolutely.
on, and I would say
but you control that.
Extreme religion, extreme politics,
Absolutely.
there are things, and we each draw the line, right? On the one
Absolutely.
hand, you will not find my religious or political views
Right.
online. On the other hand, I've blogged about the fact that I'm a parent of a transgender child
Right.
and what that is all about. Because there are things about which I've said, this is such a part of me and my life that I am willing to be very exposed about things.
Yep.
And I don't care. If you don't like me because I have a transgender child, well, I don't need to do business with you.
Why?
But when it comes to like religion and politics, I have chosen to be non-specific because I don't want to be, I don't want to go there. I mean, you're
Well, that's your answer.
No, but so what do you say about that? Is there a point at which too much personal is too much personal?
I think you have to be authentic to what matters to you. And you also have to be authentic to your goals. I know people who choose individually not to come out publicly on social media because they're fearful that that they might not be able to impact the people that they want to impact because of prejudice, which I think is a very interesting point. It's like, are you going to be an evangelist to your sexuality, or are you going to not let your sexuality get in the way of your capacity to influence another individual, right? So I mean, I think it's a very personal decision for whatever reason. Religion, for me, I was just sitting here thinking, I was like, wow, my spirituality. I love talking about my spirituality. I take people to my church, and I really want to share that as much as possible. Why would I hide that? But again, it doesn't matter. It's about what you feel comfortable with. What I can say is that the more you share this. There's a gentleman with his hand up there, and there's a lady who has a hand up there first. We'll get to the two of you in a second, I'm sure. So you can put your hand. I felt bad for you, like you're sitting right there.
Although you have a very strong arm.
Yes,
We compliment
exactly.
you
It's been
on
a long
that.
time. I gave a talk there's this thing called Summit Series. I just gave a talk recently. And it was 4 years ago. It was Summit at Sea. And I gave a talk at that original Summit at Sea. And I gave a talk again this time. And I asked the group of individuals, I said, I really want this event to be powerful. 4 years ago, where were you, and how much have you grown since then? And where did you grow? And I then shared where I grew over 4 years. I shared about losing my foster son from our home. I shared about my separation. I shared about infidelity. I shared about challenges associated with my my insecurity and a number of things associated with business and where I was. So it's like there were a bunch of things that I shared very deeply and that I would have, it's like, I don't know why I did it, but I did it in service of the audience because I wanted this trip to be something special. Then I said, I want you to go there here. I want you to lean into these conversations over this weekend on this boat. And my God, the response I got back was so beautiful. It was just so beautiful I went so far that I would have never gone. I would have considered myself a pathetic mess if I shared any one of those things, and I shared all 4. And the response I got back and the environment that was there and the environment that I guess to some extent I created was powerful. So I don't know. I want to say that I want the world to be able to go there more. I want the world to be able to go there more. We go there in our executive teams, in business. We go there at Dun & Bradstreet. And it makes this team give a damn about each other. But anyway. Yeah. No, the lady needs a mic. Oh, you don't have it? You don't have it?
It's me.
Oh, got it.
Hello. I just wanted to touch on the school, the education process. What do you feel about the conversations we're having now? Does it actually relate to the children on which are going through, similar to the 1920s, the schools hasn't really changed in that area, and it's still the same. So we're growing the children in the same environment.
I've been talking to the former mother-in-law of the founder of Google, Esther, if you guys know Esther. She's doing some amazing work in education, and I'm talking to her. I'm like, listen, how do we teach kids this? How do we teach kids this? And I don't know the answer yet, but I'm available.
Yeah, because my company works, it underlines the I Ching, so we all have natural geniuses. There's 8 ways to build wealth. And you say, people love networking. Like, I could barely get my business partner to come to networking events, but she's a genius behind the mic and everything. So I believe understanding that we're all geniuses, which is our true value.
The Gallup organization talks about strengths-based. Lean into your strengths. But anyway, on education, it's an open. You guys have anything on the education piece?
I think that with children, and I know this is going to sound kind of funny, but a lot of the techniques that we've done as a management team at Dun & Bradstreet to accelerate intimacy, empathy, et cetera, modified, you can use, and this goes back to the personal professional line, you can use with your families and your spouses and the relationships that matter most to you. And I've done that, and it's been very effective as well. Now, you have to modify it a bit, but it's very effective. All these things are critical for your personal relationships as well. And if you can instill that into your children, that helps them grow with the same mentality.
Go home and be vulnerable with a child. The greatest connection I had with my foster son, who said, "You will never be my father," was when I came home one day and I said, "I screwed up today." And I explained to him why, and he said, I do that too. And all of a sudden we had a real connection. We don't have to pedestalize ourselves as leaders. We don't have to pedestalize ourselves as parents either to make a difference.
And I think that I don't teach children, but I teach at the college level. And the most powerful thing that we do, we teach entrepreneurship at Stanford, and people say, well, can you teach entrepreneurship, or are you just born with it? It's like, well, no, some people are meant to, win the gold in Olympic swimming, but you can teach everyone to swim, right? So we try to teach everyone the entrepreneurial mindset and how to, it has a lot to do with being a growth mindset, but a big part of it is failure and how you react to failure and how you deal with failure. And the most important thing to teach college students, and frankly, Stanford college students who aren't that used to failure and they're about to have life just whoop them in the ass as soon as they get out and try to be entrepreneurs, is when we have entrepreneurs come and speak to them, it's not about talking about your successes, it's about talking about the time you got whooped in the ass. And the more you can give people that example, the more you can give people role models who are themselves failures at things. In fact, Tina Seelig, my co-teacher, talks about building a failure resume, which is really funny because when we build resumes, we all say all the things we did that were super awesome. Try just once to write your resume, which is all the worst things you've ever done, the worst things that have ever happened to you, and just look at that one day and say, which did you learn more from, your success resume or your failure resume? It's really a powerful thing. So I think this idea of role models and being vulnerable about your failures and the fact that A, you learned from them, or even B, just you survived. You're still there. And I would, you can go look. It's ecorner.stanford.edu. We put all these speeches online, and they're really, really powerful. And the most powerful thing about them is getting successful people to get up and talk about failure in a really real way is I think some of the best teaching we do.
Can we go to this lady?
Yes.
Thank you for thinking of me. Carmen Lamotte from CD Networks, and I really appreciate everything that you guys have shared tonight. My question is, just to share a little perspective, about 6 or 7 years ago, I moved to California from Philadelphia for my ex-husband. So I've been through the divorce thing too. And I found that as I was looking at my network, a lot of the people in my network at the time were pretty much based in the East Coast. Not many people knew people here in California. There was maybe one person at my current workplace that had been a transplant from California to Philadelphia. And my ex-husband knew maybe a handful of people here at the time. So I ended up turning to, this was end of 2008, start of 2009. So I ended up turning to LinkedIn to try to find additional people. And I ended up looking around at all the different functions like groups and whatnot. And eventually I signed up for some groups that were of interest to me as far as my profession and whatnot. And I ended up meeting a number of people in some of those groups where they had active threads, and I befriended some of them that made intelligent comments, and probably about 80 to 90% of the people I befriended connected with me at the time. I don't know if I get that hit right now, but I did back then. And I ended up having to go well outside my network in order to start meeting people here locally. I also got 6 or 7 phone interviews within a couple months of doing that. I got a few on-sites. I didn't get an actual job from LinkedIn until years later, but my point of bringing that up is that you mentioned something about picking the 25 people in your life. And I think there's times like when you move cross-country or you switch an industry where maybe you look at your immediate network and you might see a limitation. And what would be your advice to balancing out, focusing in on a solid handful of people in your network and building up the rapport with those people to activities towards expanding your network?
Heidi writes about this when she talks about loose ties. The answer is you focus hard on the most critical individuals and you leave yourself open for serendipity. And at the same time, you broaden that broad base, because loose ties are statistically proven to be critical to expand that network. So the answer is both. It's not either or.
And I think you find different points of intersection, right? It's one thing to say, these are the people that are obvious to me because they're in my profession. Like one of the things I've always done is I've always belonged to the trade associations in the industries I'm part of, because trade associations are interesting places where you get fellow travelers and you're all there and you're volunteering. And one thing I also find about trade associations is most people, sign up to do the work because, they sign up to be part of it because they want the brand and they don't do the work. So if you do the work where you're not getting paid in a trade association, you rise to the top pretty quickly. And you meet people outside your natural network, but they're still fellow travelers. So I think it's finding those different tangents really works. But we only have one more question, and I want to go to the person with the strongest arm in the room.
And by the way, Rishi and I, neither of us are going anywhere. So we're both staying here tonight, and he and I are going to be around. So if any of you have any questions, you're welcome to come up and ask.
Yeah, so please, last question.
I was really excited about the direction the conversation was going toward altruism and relationships. I think a lot of companies here inherently are not just about profits, but about being mission-driven and trying to give back to society. And I wanted to kind of go back to that idea of the ROI of mom that Rishi was talking about how do you, as not just an individual, but as a corporation, as a startup, start to use maybe data to do things that are not just about profit, to do things that are actually about giving back to society, building corporations that create legacies. How do we scale that at great length? And that's something that I think all of us really aspire to do as companies. And maybe to what extent do individuals at those corporations also aspire to do that, given where we are with the state of technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that being purpose-driven can very effectively also, you can leverage data to do that as well. Like for example, a lot of diversity initiatives. A lot of companies, including Dun & Bradstreet, are very passionate about diversity and making sure leaders are diverse and the board is diverse. And using analytics to make sure that those inherent biases that people have when they hire, when they promote, when they lead, data helps take those biases out and actually construct very diverse companies. And that becomes a critical way that people use analytics. Or a lot of nonprofit organizations or governments have missions that are not necessarily profits, but have other outcomes in terms of money funneled for research, or in terms of number of people served. And those could be very well measured and used as outcomes for decisions that enterprises make, whether it's at a one-to-one level in terms of personal relationships or whether it's at a more enterprise level. So this is far beyond simply looking at profits, but actually using analytics for you to achieve your mission.
So, I've loved the work that Ferrazzi Greenlight has done for 15 years now, and being able to touch executive teams and sales forces and change people's lives. I really do. I recognize that technology is a critical enabler to transform all of your lives, all of our lives. And so that's why I abandoned my old company to a great leadership team, and I went and started a new firm. Because what I wanted to focus on is changing 5 days a week you show up at work. And if I could impact how you live your life in the workplace, I can impact the world. And so what I thought about was, how does technology enable some of this intimacy acceleration, this relational acceleration? And I realized that, and all the data shows, 90% of the way you learn is not instructionally. 10% of the way you learn is through traditional training. 90% of the way you learn is through conversation and trying things and what's called informal learning, right? And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to start a company that used technology as an enabler and an accelerant to informal learning. And so we picked a period of time when when an employee in their life cycle is most interested to learn and managers are most interested in helping. We picked onboarding to start the company, and we'll go much broadly beyond that. But right now, it's a real simple idea. So Melissa comes on board to a new company. I want to know when Melissa needs help in a number of different ways. I want to know when Melissa needs help bonding with the team. I want to know when Melissa needs help with particular skills. I want to know when Melissa needs a conversation about goal congruence and goal alignment, et cetera. I want to know. And these days, if in our pockets is a conduit to answering very simple questions or telemetry into what Melissa needs now, right? And then I can hook Melissa up with this person who can provide it to them, or the manager that can provide it to them. And we're calling it connected development. We're calling it connected development, connecting you to the kind of development you need exactly when you need it because you're willing to have that dialogue. And I think that's changing the world in the future. And so technology is not going to stand in our way. It really isn't. With heartfelt people who want to change the world, technology like LinkedIn and what Reed's done can be an enabler, or Facebook, what it's done, can be an enabler of beautiful, amazing things that we can all use. The only reason I came up here obviously because of Rishi, and we've been of service to his company and personally. But the only reason I came up here is because so many of you in technology companies, you've got your finger on changing the world. And I wanted to be here because obviously if anybody's interested in my company, YaYa, it's called YaYa, which is Japanese for getting better. I'd love to talk to you if you're interested in bringing it into your company. But I wanted to be here where you all are influencing the way the world is going, using technology as an enabler. And bringing the relational sciences into technology, I think, is going to change all of our lives. That's my hope.
Great. Well,
Keith, thank you so much for sharing your points of view so generously and authentically. Really appreciate that. as a small gesture of our thanks, we have for you this evening the Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
I will take that. And doesn't Heidi rock? Heidi rocks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, guys. That was great.
A recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel within the next couple of days, and you will find recordings of most, if not, well, really almost all of our programs. We hope that you find that to be a very useful resource, and you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. See you next time. Good night.